Let's be honest, stopping support for Star Wars Battlefront 2 was one of the dumbest decisions EA ever made. And the fact that Star Wars Battlefront 3 still has not been announced is astronomically baffling to me. So, given the dry spell of Star Wars games, because we all know Ubisoft did not release a boring, unimaginative slog of a game last year, I thought it would be a great time to talk about the potential heroes and villains that I would like to see in Star Wars Battlefront 3, along with changes that I would make to the current roster of characters. Just as a small disclaimer, know that my opinions about these characters are on the characters themselves. This does not reflect my opinions on the actors. To be honest, I pretty much don't really condone anyone going after the actors for a character coming across poorly. That's more on the screenwriters or the producers over the actors. That seems really ridiculous to me. Along with don't go after any fans who publicly enjoy a show you may not like yourself. They have every right to enjoy it just as much as we have to not enjoy it. But before all that, I first of all want to discuss the ranking system I have these characters. First rank would be the core characters. These are characters I believe should be in the game pretty much from launch or almost immediately after, so I feel like they're in there from day one. The second is mid-rim characters. These characters, again, wouldn't need to be in the game at launch, but it wouldn't be a surprise. It wouldn't feel like they're taking up another character spot. Then I have outer rim. Would be surprising, but not too unexpected. And finally, I have Wild Space. These are the characters I view as highly surprising, very unexpected, and if they make it in before certain other characters and the game gets cancelled again, it's gonna feel a bit odd, a bit like BB-8 and BB-9E in Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's gonna feel like that. So now let's discuss the changes. Don't worry, there aren't too many I'll make to the current roster. Most of these characters I believe should be in Star Wars Battlefront 3. They're really only three changes, or three strong changes, I think should be made to the roster. The first, give Palpatine a lightsaber. He used it so much in Revenge of the Sith. Just goddamn give him one at this point. It's been 2 games in a row. The second is entirely replacing Iden Versio. Her story is over. She was pretty much on Starkiller Base when it blew up and was shot the first time one of those things actually worked in Disney Star Wars, and I think the last. So yeah, her story's wrapped up and she ended as a hero. So I think the characters who I would like to see replace Iden are either Baylan Skoll, one of the most popular characters from the Ahsoka series, Grand Admiral Thrawn, again a pretty popular one from the Ahsoka series and before that. But if you want to go for less popular characters, I think the 8th brother or 9th sister would also be good picks. I think the only reason I strongly lean towards Thrawn is because he's most likely to be a blaster villain, and Iden was a blaster, so replacing a blaster with a blaster. I personally will see this between Baylan and Thrawn over the 8th brother and 9th sister. And the third and final change I have is to Boba Fett, is changing Boba to a hero, as I don't think the type of villain suits Boba anymore, given the fact he's been changed more into a anti-hero over a true villain, given his recent development. And this isn't just in the Book of Boba Fett. You can also see this slight change in Jedi Survivor, where Boba helps Cal Kestis and lets him go. He has no qualms with Cal, so he just lets him go free rather than take a potential bounty out on Cal, a Jedi in the Age of the Empire. He lets him go. I believe a true villain would have taken Cal in. And while on Boba Fett, I may as well talk about the other character from the series I think should be a hero on the roster, along with who I think should be replaced him as a villain. And the other hero from that series is pretty obvious, Fennec Shand. She's a very strong pick, finally given the light side a sniper character as well. The villain I think should be replacing Boba should be Cad Bane. They're both active from around about the same time, so makes a lot of sense. And for against Fennec, I think the second villain should be Rako Hardeen from the Clone Wars. We don't really know what happened to him after the Clone Wars episode he was in, so yeah, pretty strong pick. There's nothing in canon saying he stopped bounty hunting during the Age of the Empire or in the sequel, so he's another sniper, very good to go against Fennec. And while we're on the subject of the Clone Wars and the prequels, this is the next era I'm going to be heading to. Now, let's be honest, the prequels saved Star Wars Battlefront 2, and there were just so many more characters I think we all wanted to see be playable in this game. And one of the most requested characters off that list I have here is Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's Padawan. Yeah. The fact she wasn't in the game was just a travesty when it ended. It was very much a highly requested character, and along with her, let's have another member of the 501st, that being Clone Captain Rex. Super highly requested character. Just overall, both of these two, it's more surprising they weren't in the game at the end, and Rex is just so cool for a clone, along with his highly unique armour will help him stand out compared to his other brothers on the battlefield. Both of these characters I pretty much say are core characters and should be in at launch. The next character I have is also super close to Anakin, and that would be Padme Amidala. Again, I believe she is pretty much a character who is needed at launch, so a core character. And I could kind of imagine the funny banter between her, Ahsoka, Anakin, Obi-Wan and Rex. That would just be funny to have in the game as well. And speaking of Obi-Wan, next I have his master, Qui-Gon Jinn. Yeah, honestly, just put him in the game. He could be a very interesting Jedi to see in this with some very unique abilities. So, yeah. Now moving away from Anakin to pretty much someone who hated him, I have the only Jedi to wield a purple lightsaber in canon, which is, of course, Mace Windu. That purple lightsaber is just so iconic, and he has some very unique abilities in the Force, similar to Qui-Gon. Well, not similar, but quite destructive abilities in the Force. He would just be so cool to play in a Star Wars Battlefront game, finally. And I feel like it could be pretty interesting seeing him against Sidious and him probably win, which he actually did in the film as well. And the final hero that I have from the prequels that I consider to be a core character is Bo-Katan Kryze. Finally given the light side, another jetpack hero. That's great in my opinion, because that was very much a disadvantage in the first game, and a cool character like Bo-Katan definitely deserves it. She could be a character that goes through pretty much all the eras as well, as we know she was active during them. And yeah, overall cool to have a Mandalorian on the light side. Now for the prequel hero who I consider to be pretty mid-rim, I have Jedi Master Plo Koon. Honestly, made pretty much awesome by the Clone Wars TV show, and I think again a lot of people would just love to finally play as him. And this next character I consider to be a out-of-rim character. She has the most deaths out of everyone in the series. That is Jedi Master Shock T. I'd love to see her be playable in this game, but I can see how many of these other characters would be wanted over her. But she is quite a cool character. Honestly, played Star Wars Force Unleashed. She's generally a hard boss to beat. So yeah, Shock T definitely should be on the roster at some point in my opinion. And finally, the only prequel hero I consider to be Wild Space is the daughter. A literal Force God would be awesome to play as, but she is pretty neat as she only appeared in 3 episodes of the Mortis arc, one of my personal favourite arcs if I'm honest. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot more characters who they would probably want to make before the daughter, which again should be awesome to play. And with the heroes out of the way, let's move on to the villains that I want to see be playable in the next game, starting off with the Dathomirian witch, Asajj Ventress. Again, some pretty unique abilities in the Force, given her, well, Coven and what Mother Talzin did. So yeah, pretty cool character. Next up will be the clone's progenitor himself, Jango Fett. Make sure to keep the jetpack heroes pretty even on both sides. Another bounty hunter in this regard, I have Aurra Sing. She is a very, very odd character, but I still consider her to be pretty core to the game. She is well known in the lore, and she has been talked about quite widely. Unfortunately, her tenure stops just before the Empire, so she'll be a Clone Wars exclusive. Aiding one of her fellow Coven members, I next have Mother Talzin. Again, appeared quite a bit in the Clone Wars TV show. Very unique abilities and doesn't really use a blaster or a lightsaber, uses her magics to attack, so pretty cool pick. And another Mandalorian that should be on the dark side I have is Gar Saxon. Again, making sure that they don't get a true advantage on the light side, but trying to keep it a bit more even when it comes to jetpacks in the game. Last core character I have is Darth Plagueis. Again, died before the prequels really truly started and before he was even on screen, but he'll be quite fun. Imagine in him having some lines with Palpatine as well, and some very stern words. I believe it would be a tragedy to leave him out of the game of Darth Plagueis the Wise. The first mid-rim character I have is Savage Opress. Pretty tanky character in my opinion, built like a goddamn house. I can see why a lot of people could say many of these other characters said before will get him before him, but he doesn't need too much work to make him more unique to the others. The out-of-him character I have for the villains is Starkiller or Galen Marek. You may have heard me make a small reference to him earlier with Shock T. So yeah, I think it would be awesome to have Galen Marek finally be playable again, and he really needs a new coat of graphics on him. And to counteract his sister in Wild Space, I have the son. Again, similar reasons to the daughter in this regard. You're basically playing as a Force god on the dark side. They can have some very interesting attacks, but yeah, I see why a lot more characters will come in before he would. Now, with the prequel characters out the way, let's move on to the more transitional time from the prequels to the originals. These are characters that I see as definitely playable from the Age of the Republic and the Rebel Age. And to start this off, let's talk about one of the better animated shows, the Bad Batch. Well, the way I see the Batch working, I more see the Bad Batch conduct themselves along with bounty hunters from the prequel era. And yes, I believe that Hunter, Echo, Tech, Wrecker, and Crosshairs should all be pretty much mid-rim characters, definitely playable shortly after launch. Again, the way I view it, it could be a season of the Bad Batch and Bounty Hunters coming out at the same time. The only member of the Batch I view as a little lower, as a more outer character, is Omega, because she is a child for most of it. So, but they can use her design from the final episode, which is why I think she could still make the roster. And on the villain side for this, I see this being more on the lane of bounty hunters, or, well, let's do the Batch themselves. I first have Dr. Aphra. Not really much of a bounty hunter, more of a archaeologist, but she works very closely with Vader, and she has two very unique droids. First bounty hunter I have is Embo, pretty popular character, and the rest were seen in Boba Fett's Crate Claw. That would be Latz Razzle, C-21 High Slinger, and this one kind of appeared a little bit out of it, IG-88. These characters I view as all pretty much mid-rim characters, and to go along with Omega as a out-rim character, I have a just kind of Clone X Trooper. I know there are a lot of copies of the Clone X Troopers and a lot of variants of them. I'm talking about the kind of more standard one we saw up here often throughout season 3 of the Bad Batch show. He makes the most sense. He's probably the most iconic one of the rest of the Clone X Troopers, so yeah, he makes the most sense to me. Light speeding over to one of the most popular video games that Star Wars has had recently, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor. Of course, for the hero side, I have Cal Kestis, Cere Junda, and Merrin. All three of these just make way too much sense and would be great picks. I pretty much have them as mid-rim. And for the villains of the Jedi series, I first of all have Dagan Gera. I view him as a bit more of an opponent than the Ninth Sister was to Cal, as he defeated her very swiftly at the start of Survivor, and Dagan felt like way much more of a threat than she did. And then I have Second Sister, again a massive threat throughout the entirety of the game. You faced her many times. And then finally I have Taran Malakos. He is a very strong boss character, and I feel like he very much deserves a spot. Now, bringing us the brink to A New Hope, I have the less popular animated series Star Wars Rebels. On the hero side, as core characters, I have Ezra Bridger and Sabine Wren, and as mid-rim I have Kanan Jarrus and Zeb. On the villain side, for Ezra's opponent, I think it should be the Seventh Sister. She made antagonize him the most throughout Rebels. And for Sabine, I had to really think about this a bit more. It could have gone with Gar Saxon's brother, but he doesn't really have that much of a unique moveset. So instead I thought I'd go for a more popular character who we don't really know is active at this point, Shin Hati. She is just way much more popular than Gar's brother was. I don't even remember his name personally. So yeah, I think she would be a much cooler pick, and to have her alongside her master Baylan Skoll, to me, is just a bit perfect. And for Kanan Jarrus' opponent, I have the Grand Inquisitor. Again, just makes the most sense. They had that very cool fight at the end of season 1. And it's not really against him, but I have Ruok, who appeared in season 4. Him is a pretty good pick and would have a unique abilities. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for Rebels. Now we're finally at the originals. Now let's be honest with ourselves, most of the original characters I could pick are already in the game. Yes, I'm giving them core, they need to be in at launch. That's the barest of bare minimum. That's not really even the bare minimum, that's just needed, otherwise this game will fail out launch. So there aren't really that strong characters from the original films. I have Nien Nunb for the heroes and Greedo for the villains. Now going just before A New Hope, but I'm counting it as some of the originals because it's literally 11 days before the events of A New Hope. I believe from Rogue One, Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor should join on the hero side as core characters, and for the villains I have Director Krennic from Rogue One and Drayden Mirio, going off the original movies themselves but into a more odd time during that transition period. I have one more hero and one more villain, and this would be Barriss Offee and the fourth sister. These two I would say are pretty out of rim. They only really appeared in Tales of the Empire. Well, Barriss appeared in Clone Wars as well, but they only really got a spotlight in them in Tales of the Empire. But they could be cool picks. Barriss being a healer and all, yeah, could honestly be pretty cool. And now moving on to the time skip of the originals and the sequels, and I'm going to be talking about probably the most popular Star Wars show, The Mandalorian. And yes, Din Djarin himself I view as needed at launch, so he's a core character along with the villain Moff Gideon. The rest of them are a bit odd. The other two heroes I have are Paz Vizsla and the Armourer. These were strong picks, but I view them more as outer rim characters, not needed at launch, but wouldn't be surprising. And for the villains, I have one who died in Clone Wars, that was Almec. You don't remember him, he only appeared for a brief moment. He does wear Mandalorian armor, but only in Season 6. And Rook Kast. Again, if you don't remember who she is, she only got a massive role in the comics. She appeared very briefly in Season 6 of Clone Wars, so if you don't remember who she is, fair enough. And let's move on finally to the sequels. And there's not many characters to go over here. The character I would have is mid-rim, and that would be Poe Dameron, the best star pilot in the Resistance. And against him on the villain side, I have General Armitage Hux. Again, both of these are mid-rim. Could see them at launch, but less strongly. And the final ones I have are Wild Space. On the hero side, I have Rose Tico and Janna. Again, no one's really going to be high demanding these characters. And on the villain side, I have Cardinal and Commander Pyre. If you don't know who these two are, again, doesn't really surprise me. You kind of have to go hunting to know who these two are, so don't blame yourself for not knowing. And with that, that covers it. Wait, what? Do I have to cover that show? Let's finally talk about the Acolyte, the best show imaginable. When it comes to the hero characters of the Acolyte, I think it should be the main three that we're following throughout the first half of the show. So that would be Jeki, Sol, and Yord, and I believe that their ranking will be around about the mid-rim. And then on the villain side, I think it should be how the show ended, that being the three of Chimera, Osha, and May. Before I finish this video, I want to go over a couple of honourable mentions. These are basically characters who I think could be in the game, but they don't have matches for the type of hero or villain that I think they would be. As in both Battlefront games, there were an even number of lightsaber characters on both sides, and that was similar with the blaster characters. But if you want to replace some of them I've said earlier with these characters, that's absolutely fine by me. Let me know in the comment section if you think some of these characters deserve a spot a little bit more than ones I've said previously. Starting off in the hero side, I have Jedi Master Kit Fisto, Elias Akira, Limora Anduli, Quillen Boss, Vanessa Rowe, Commander Cody, Clone Sergeant Boss, Saw Gerrera, Hera Syndulla, Jura Erna, Base Morbus, K2SO, Agent Callis, KVS, ND5, IG11, Cosco Reeves, and Axe Wolves. And for the villain side, starting off the prequels, I have Rick Tamsin, Pre Vizsla, Dirge, Twazi, Dengar, Grand Moff Tarkin, Ravis, Darth Mormon, the First Brother, Third Sister, Fourth Brother, Sixth Brother, 10th Brother, 11th Brother, the Pirate from the Skeleton Crew, Snoke, and Morgan Elsmouth. That pretty much covers it. All the heroes and villains that I personally could think of. Are there any that you could think of? Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, if you want to, leave a like if you want to hear me again, subscribe to the channel. And with that, goodbye.